Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is Kian Jabour, and as usual, this is my co-host, Mr. Timothy Jonas.
Good evening, everyone.
Tim and I spoke on the phone earlier today, decided what we're going to talk about, and then we decided 2 seconds ago we're going to talk about again. So this is the conversation was. Let me tell you. The first thing is we started on the conversation about this nurse. We just saw it on the news, and I like to try to stay as abreast as possible. And we just saw this nursing assistant that has been remanded to prison.
A nursing aide.
A nursing aide that has been remanded to prison based on the Terrorism Act, inciting public terrorism. You know what, Tim? Go for it. I don't know. People don't like this side of me, but I'm sorry. At the end of the day, she could be a really, really, really bad person. All right. Maybe she did this with poor faith. There has not been a full trial yet. This Terrorism Act has been used to almost drive fear into people, into staying quiet. Or I can tell you right now, I have made my posts and I've had many people typing, "You're inciting terrorism." And I asked them to show it to me. Well, how am I doing that? Because you're not calling for peace. And I'm sitting there saying, I'm not also calling for violence. At no point in time have I told anybody to go on the road. But that's not the point. What they've tried to do is fear mongering. They're making sure that everybody now is scared to speak. And I'm sorry, watching this nursing aide remanded to prison without a complete trial, if you will. And it says the next court date is May the 30th. Now this young lady might be this young lady is a liar. Let's give it the worst case scenario. She is a liar. Let's say all that she said was wrong.
Well, don't say that because that sounds like a definitive statement. But let us say,
good,
for the purposes of the argument,
good,
that she lied. Let's say for the purposes of this argument, because we don't know.
For the purposes of the argument, she lied.
Good.
What is your take on this? Having been now remanded to prison without a full court hearing.
I was disappointed when I read it. I read it half an hour ago. So I was looking at this newsroom article. Nurse's aide remanded to prison for inciting terrorism by some kind of communication over social media. Now, other people have been charged with this offense and have gotten bail. So I want to talk about bail because I was startled to see that a 23-year-old woman who is a mother of two, who has a job, and who turned herself into the police when she learned of the charge.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't run away and hide. She's not an escaped person. She's not someone trying to evade the law. She turned herself in.
It's not a violent crime against someone.
And then she's taken before the magistrate. And the question then arises, well, when should a magistrate give bail? Or when should a magistrate refuse bail? And this is something that has come up over and over and over again, and it seems to be ignored.
Mm.
If you're a flight risk, that's a factor against you for bail, because you're presumed innocent until the trial is had. Mm. Nobody knows if you're guilty or not. And the question is, should we keep you locked up and incarcerated pending the trial?
Yeah.
If we think you're going to run away, so that if you're convicted, we can't punish you, that's a factor to keep you on remand. Mm. If you're a danger to society, if you're a menace, if you're a violent person, so someone in domestic violence who habitually beats his wife and is threatening to do it again, you got to put that person away, pending trial.
Yeah.
Certain very serious offenses like murder, you don't get bail in Guyana. But on all the factors that I'm looking at here, where this person turned themselves into the police, clearly not a flight risk, where this person has a job, so is a member of society who should be going to work and living her life, where she has two young children, she's 23, those children can't be more than 4 or 5. They are now deprived of their mother. And I do not see any justification for saying to this woman who turned herself in, who is there voluntarily before the magistrate to face her charge, we locking you up. Yeah. I don't see the justification for it. And I am not aware of any judicial attention paid to this kind of thing that would justify the refusal of bail in those circumstances. And
Right.
I'm sorry to be this blunt about it, but I was disappointed when I saw it.
Yeah. No, Tim, I fully agree with you, because at the end of the day, for example, from how I understood this, and I listened, is a voice note that was done, and I listened to the voice note. It didn't sound like this young lady knew that she was being recorded. Again, up for debate, right? Definitely just stating my stance on it. And then if she was recorded in secret, even though she lied, even though what she said may have not been truthful, that person that secretly recorded her went and disseminated that information. How is the young lady in jail for having a private conversation so any of us that have private conversations that we don't tell the truth in and are secretly recorded, we could go to jail for this?
Well, again, you're getting into the facts that I don't want to get into.
Right, fair.
Because I just want to make the point to the public.
Yeah.
The public, you see, for the legal system to be fair, it needs to be predictable. Everybody needs to know these are the rules and this is what's going to happen. Because if it's arbitrary, it's not fair.
Right.
If you are not a flight risk, if the crime is such that, and I think for this crime, a $500,000 fine is the penalty or an alternative of imprisonment. But if that's the case, set the bail at $500,000.
It says she was refused bail.
But she has refused bail. So she
Yes.
is incarcerated on remand without a finding of guilt, and also without a finding as to whether she's a flight risk, whether she's a danger to society, if she's violent. And I do not see how that can be justified in these circumstances, given that other people
Yeah.
are granted bail for the same
Agreed.
offense pending the trial.
Agreed.
Not a 23-year-old mother of two. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. And in this situation here, again, we don't have all the facts yet. This is important, right? But I mean, we've watched, and let me tell you guys what our program is about today. Tim and I, we had a conversation. We decided we're going to have a conversation about the similarities between APNU and PPP. All right, and we've reached a point. Tim, I'm going to be very honest with you. It's the conversation. I think if I know there are the entrenched PPP and PNC members that will never have this conversation and the debate will never happen, but I can tell you, at least for younger people, all right, the conversation is being had now. All right, who do I vote for? Do I vote for the party that tried to rig the elections, or do I vote for the party in which mass numbers of children are going to jail and people are dying and people are wrongfully going to jail? All right, and this is a conversation that is leaving at least the younger generation in the unknown. All right, it is a rock and a hard place, and the issue that you're having is it goes right back to, and this is the problem I'm having these conversations, is the lesser of two evils. All right, again, you and I know our stance. We support third parties. We've already written off the PPP and the PNC. I'm not interested in ever voting for the two of them. All right, and me staying home is also an issue, because not voting is even worse than voting for the wrong person, in my opinion. But in this case, I know there are going to be some third parties that run. We know that. And the idea now is, what do we do with our vote? All right. So I want to have a conversation with you on different levels as to how these two parties are similar and kind of lend to the conversation that if the older entrenched, I voted PPP, I voted PNC, and they'll never change their mind, this conversation is probably not for you guys, but at least for the younger generation to understand the similarities between these two parties, to maybe help in aiding their decision at bare minimum. You know what I mean? I think it needs to be a little bit more of an educational program. And I'd like to start by having a conversation about use of the police, because I think that's an important factor, especially right now when the Adriana Young investigation is still ongoing, and the Linden matter that happened recently, the police issues that are being had on that context, tied back in with what happened during APNU times, in which a lot of people don't remember this for some reason, but you remember 2 protesters during the 2020 election were shot and killed?
I do remember there were two deaths. I
Yeah,
don't remember the
for some reason, people don't
circumstances.
really remember that. So again, I'm pointing out the similarities here, right? And again, a protester was shot in Linden just a couple of weeks ago, and it's showing the police force in both cases having one, little to no accountability, two, little to no training, just kind of left in the disarray they are. But again, based on the laws that govern them. Now, here's what I want to in the as the conversation progresses. Here's what I really want to tie this into. I want to tie this into oppression. Let me just say it as this. I want to tie this into why there's such a vast majority of Guyanese that are still in poverty, that are still not finding their way to clutch their way out of an impoverished system, well, in their life cycle, and how the system has been designed to keep them in the position they are economically.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, but I think if we look at Guyana's history, we see the answer. The closest comparison I have to Guyana is Trinidad, where there is a similar, not equal, but a similar race balance. Mm-hmm. And yet Trinidad has had elections held honestly with integrity, with nobody questioning the outcome. And the party has changed. So the party that won last election may be voted out. In fact, the elections they had just the other day, the party was voted out. So how is it that in Trinidad, you have the same kind of situation? You have two parties which, when you look at them, you see that they have ethnic alliances.
Agreed.
And yet, one party does not feel that it will be there in power forever. And there are two factors that I think have influenced that tragedy in Guyana. The first factor is the fear that is generated from the knowledge that elections have been rigged. Mm-hmm. So we had a history up to 1992 of rigged elections where Chedi Jagan's party, which would win any fair election up to 1997, was kept out of power for 28 years because Burnham rigged elections, cycle after cycle after cycle. And he used his control of parliament to give himself such a majority that in 1980 he was able to dictate a whole new constitution. Mm. He couldn't have done that without two-thirds majority, and he gave himself the two-thirds majority by rigging elections. He used his control of parliament to perpetuate his control of the police force, of the army, of all the institutions of state, so that there was total control and total ostracism of the PPP and their supporters. And no one can seriously dispute that. Mm. So we have this inherent distrust. That distrust waned over the years between 92 and 2015, when we saw an increasingly corrupt PPP government, kept there by fair elections. The elections were fair, but when the fear of rigged elections waned sufficiently that the PNC was reinserted in 2015, they promptly go and rig the elections in 2020 again. Mm-hmm. So we're back to square one. So we have that mutual distrust that cannot be overcome. And therefore, the people who are entrenched and voting are really justified in their position. Because how can you say to anybody on the street, man, don't worry, you can trust the elections, and as our politicians like to say, trust the process. Mm-hmm. The second factor, I think, and this is one that we see in Guyana and does not exist to the extent in Trinidad, where there is a large and prosperous and educated and enlightened middle class, is that in Guyana, the poor have been kept poor, have been kept in poverty. Okay. And that, to me, that's an important thing. You see, if you go into the villages and you interact with the people who are poor, uneducated, working in the agriculture belt, they, for the most part, see the politicians and those fancy-speaking, suit-wearing people as something higher, something that they can aspire to. Mm-hmm. What it means is that when they are deciding how to cast their vote, they are much more susceptible to those fancy-talking people, and they are much more easily persuaded to distrust the party that doesn't look like them. But what it means is that for both the PPP and the PNC to ensure that their grassroots voter base is intact, they got to keep them poor. They got to keep them uneducated.
Right.
And if anyone wants to challenge this, wants to debate this, I will point out to you that one of the things that has happened in Guyana since the 2000s, as Guyana became more prosperous, and those people at the bottom became more prosperous, they were able to educate their children to a larger extent. And we're talking about a minority here, just a couple thousand people. They became upwardly mobile. They carried the children to private schools proliferate. And they begin to see the politicians, their leaders, not as some kind of deity, some kind of god, but as ordinary people. And they begin to question the policies and the practices by these very ordinary, mediocre people that are leading them. And they begin to realize that these people do not run the country as well as they should, and they could probably run the country better.
Agreed.
So what's happening is, as our middle class is growing, we're becoming more like Trinidad. We have a greater number of people who are curious and questioning their leaders, and that's a danger. And I think those are the two differences between the Guyana scenario and the Trinidad scenario: the growth of the middle class and the history of rigged elections.
Okay. All right. Let's completely agree. Let's talk about how both governments have kept people in poverty, have kept the poor and uneducated here in Guyana. Because I think, again, that growing middle class that you're talking about, this younger generation who, even to the complement of social media, are more exposed, are seeing more, are getting more information, at least at their fingertips through their phones and the internet. Now, I'd like to have a conversation about the systems that these two parties have put in place, right, and have maintained in order to keep the status quo, in order to make sure people are left where they are, uneducated, economically struggling, so that they can control them.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned social media, because one of the phenomenon that has taken place over the last 10 years is that access to social media, access to television, because we didn't have television 20 years ago, it was a rare commodity, access to seeing how societies out of Guyana work, increased travel, so Guyanese are traveling more. They're seeing how stuck and primitive our problems are and what the potential and the possibilities are. Now, one of the ways that our two governments, our two parties historically have controlled thoughts and minds is by controlling the media. So before 1989, for example, under Burnham's PNC, private media was not permitted. And the only newspaper available was the Chronicle, which was owned by the state. So when you read a paper, you read what the state wanted you to know, what the government wanted you to read. And the Catholic Standard, which was a privately owned newspaper, was deprived of newsprint, deprived of paper. Steps were taken by the government to keep that newspaper down. In 1989, Desmond Hoyt, one of our more enlightened leaders, reluctantly agreed to allow Starbrook News to be formed. And Starbrook News was an immediate hit, an independent newspaper. I don't think anyone will question that. And then Kaieteur News came along. But there were efforts to control that. So everyone will remember, I'm sure, that when the government of the day did not like what Starbrook News was saying, they pulled ads from Starbrook News. So the same government that gives Chronicle all the advertisements from the state. So every time, if you look for an award of contracts, if you're looking for any advertisement by NIS or by any of the government agencies, that ad will appear in the Chronicle, even though Kaieteur News and Starbrook News had reached a stage where they were selling more papers than Chronicle. You're supporting your own state-owned paper. And then, to make matters worse, we had reached a stage where government formally, openly, without an apology, decided that they are going to try to control Starbrook News by taking away ads from Starbrook News, so hurt them financially. We know here, with the advent of social media, that the media needs to be controlled somehow, so that some steps are going to be taken to regulate what is published in the media. That is very dangerous. And if we don't have freedom of access to information, freedom of access to the news from the world points of views that are more enlightened, more modern, more reformist, so that we can look at our leaders and our situation with an objectivity that didn't exist under the Burnham regime, then we are going backward rather than forward. But we are seeing it happen. It is one of the ways that both governments in their day, both parties, have tried to control thought processes in the citizens of Guyana.
Good. Absolutely. So media being the first one, and I completely agree with it. To control the minds, you want to control the thought process, you want to control the conversation that's being had, and then they portray it in a way which we see again in Chronicle and NCN, etc. That portray themselves as a fact-based entity, and in actual fact they're just spinning and twisting an opinion and presenting it in a way that, unfortunately, the uneducated, even more so, the uneducated will not be able to read between the lines of.
And then, when someone rightly or wrongly publishes something that you don't like,
right,
whether it's a truth, whether it's a lie, you have passed legislation to perpetuate your power and to control that by allowing prosecutions for inciting terrorism.
Yeah, very good tie-in. All right, now that's the first system. Here, I want to get a little bit deeper, Tim, because look, I got the comment right here on Facebook, and it's again the comment that just continues, and I think it needs to be addressed. People are poor in Guyana because they are lazy. Okay, that is how majority of this population feel, and then even more so the uneducated, because Tim, we got to get a little bit psychological here. We got to talk about something a little bit larger, the system that is designed from colonization. I'm talking about, what has been the tools that have been utilized to keep people where they are, unaware that they are being kept there. That needs to be the conversation, because people are missing it. They sit down there every day and I watch these businessmen talk. Oh, guy, he's just lazy. I got plenty of them. I want high and they don't want to work and blah, blah. How much you paying them? Oh, normal salary, 200,000-300,000. I say, you could live on 200,000-300,000. No, but they should be able to walk and build themselves out with them. And that conversation needs to be challenged, because they're not understanding why that is part of the issue. They're not understanding what born into extreme poverty, and again, the studies done all over the world. Again, Guyana is not a unique case. And this, I think, is missed by so many people out there. Again, not educated enough or exposed enough. We are not special or unique in any way. What has happened in this country and what is happening has happened all over the world already. They've already evolved past this. Lots of people have dealt with the corruption, dealt with the governments every country you could talk to, there's been a government that has tried to maintain control, to change the rules to keep themselves in power. It's normal. Now, how they got out of that is a conversation to understand first how it's happening, and then you'll understand how to get out of it. But our education system, our curriculum, all right. Our tax structure, something as simple as the amount of money that people earn, seeing the way NIS is set up, no particular light at the end of the tunnel, pension, again, the police force, back to the police force, not giving people protection, them being left in a state where even if they earn something nice, they get a nice car, they build a nice extra piece of the house, they've got to deal with thieves now, right? Because there's nobody protecting them. The health system, again, Guyana, luckily, actually one of our saving graces is that we have a free healthcare system. All right, granted, maybe not world class, etc., but nonetheless, you can be happy that system has been put in place. So between just your basic entities of education, health, and security, coupled with the economics, the conversation has to be had as to why being born into extreme poverty 90% of the time will continue a cycle of extreme poverty.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. One factor that you didn't put in that I think is central as well is the breakdown in the family structure.
Yes, agreed.
You see, one of the things we did inherit, we like to blame the colonials, and I reject that, because we've been independent for 60 years. Come on, at some point you got to grow up and take responsibility for your own problems and your own actions. But one thing we did inherit, and Walter Rodney wrote about it, and it's true, that part of slavery and part of the lifestyles of the planters was a kind of do what you want, laissez-faire, in terms of maintaining a family, keeping your responsibility to your family, looking after your wife, looking after your children. The family structure has always broken down. And in Guyanese communities, you see that there is no judgment of young men who go and proliferate, who making children all over the place. The term child mother, child father is much more prevalent than the term husband and wife. Mm-hmm. Now, if you are a child born to a single parent, so daddy has disappeared and you only got mommy, and mommy might have 2, 3, 4 children, and she is not in a position to work because her education level is what we know the education provides in Guyana. So she is probably living with her mother. Mm-hmm. When you are put through the school system and your own mother has not been able to look after you, you are then thrown into the workforce, thrown onto the workplace. Look, if you got a family structure, mommy and daddy have looked after you, they put you through school. Even if when you start out at $150,000 or $100,000, you are going home in the afternoon to your parents' home. Mm-hmm. A stable environment. You can budget, and the meager amount that you are making is seen as a temporary measure while you get to something better. Mm-hmm. If you are born in the kind of situation where you're brought up, somebody I know calls it brought up by wolves. You are brought up in an environment that is hostile. Mm-hmm. That some family members in jail, father disappeared, didn't meet his responsibilities, mommy can't work and look after all these children. It is a hostile situation. By the time you're 14, and I'm talking about boys, I'm sure girls are the same thing, mm-hmm. You're vexed. Mm-hmm. You are harboring hatred and hostility. Mm-hmm. You hate the rich people you see there. You hate your own circumstances, but you don't have any means to change it. Mm-hmm. So you got to hustle. Yeah. And again, I will invite Guyanese to consider that the word hustle is much more prevalent than the word gainfully employed. And hustle often means thieving. Yeah. So you're picking pockets, you're looking for an opportunity, you're robbing. The question of ethics and morality does not come into it. Mm-hmm. But that same 14-year-old boy, 15, 16, 17, by the time he's 18, guess what? He already got a child and has already disappeared. Mm-hmm. So the cycle is perpetuated. And that individual would have to be extraordinary to rise above that and become upwardly mobile. It's easy for somebody who grew up in a middle-class environment, in a nuclear family, mommy and daddy there, even if it's some parent who is able to look after that person, it is easy for them, even if they are not extraordinary, mm-hmm. to become productive citizens. But if you grow up in that hostile environment, you got to be extraordinary to rise above the mud of the Maikoni Creek or the Mara situation. Mm-hmm. You have to be extraordinary. And I'm sorry, most of us are average. That's what the word average means. And if you grow up in that environment, you just perpetuate it until the next generation comes along. So the family environment is important. But unfortunately, our systems are not geared as they should be to give single mothers advantages, to provide housing for single mothers, put money in their pockets so that they have the wherewithal to get away from an abusive spouse, to get away from domestic violence, to look after their children, to get work. NIS should be there to look after single mothers, people who are very poor, people who are disabled, so that they can have the dignity and the opportunity to come out of that situation of poverty. Mm-hmm. So you're right, the education system continues to crush the people at the bottom. The absence of any assistance in terms of providing money to subsidize a low income or to provide money for single parents who are not making ends meet. Yeah. To ensure that children get into school and to incentivize parents to keep their children in school, that doesn't exist. Yeah. And therefore we are perpetuating that vicious cycle. Mm-hmm. And then we're surprised when people say it's dangerous to go in Starbuck Market. Of course it's dangerous to go in Starbuck Market. They got more thieves than vendors in Starbuck Market. Right. Because we have done this to ourselves as a society. Yes.
And again, I'm watching all the comments, and it's the same people that saying, it's somebody just... you know, there's why do I say these comments? The one person writes, They just don't know about thieving. They ain't got no education. The thieves wearing better clothes than me, you vote PPP. And that's what you're getting. So you're
Well, to that person, I would like to say that we've had PPP since 92 to 2015, and then we've had PPP from 2020 to now, and it's still dangerous to go in Starbucks Market,
yeah,
and the thieves still wearing better clothes than you, and they still got more thieves than and the
right.
society is still dangerous. Go ahead and vote PPP.
Yeah, it's like they're not understanding. So now, again, obviously the key, as has been studied all over the world, and you don't need a study to figure it out, but people can speak about it. Go and Google it if you want. The key of changing society, the key of uplifting society is education, right? We know
That's the
that.
first step.
That is the first step.
And in a poor society, it's not just enough to say we don't even have the education side because the children are not being taught in the public schools.
Yeah.
But also, in a very poor society, education must include holistic care.
Yes.
So a parent must get a sum of money for uniforms. The child must be fed in school. School must provide not just the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. It must provide sports. It must train the children to be productive members of the society because they're not getting that from the villages where they are. A lot of them are not being brought up in a way that empowers them and equips them to be productive members of the society.
I like this what you hit, but let me just touch on just before I get to what you just said, the holistic education side. One of the things again that the system has failed in doing, and because you brought up the family dynamic first, is the fact that first of all, why is our systems not ensuring that both parents, whichever one has decided to have a child and leave, is not paying child support, for example? Why exactly is that system not more rigid in this country? Why is it that, you speak about, the 18-year-old boy who, grew up in extreme poverty, parents uneducated and poor, not being able to care for him and nurture him like a child should be cared for and nurtured for, gone out on the road, living a rough life, and then goes and gets somebody pregnant, and then ends up in a situation where they're able to just leave.
Ah, good. So again, part of the breakdown in our society is that the structures of government administration that should be monitoring this don't. First of all, we talk about poverty and we say these people lazy. I don't know about you, but if I think of myself at 18 and I was out on the street and didn't have a roof over my head, didn't have that safety net of a family, if you offered me the modern equivalent of $80,000 or $100,000 a month that I gotta feed myself, clothe myself, find shelter, and then hopefully every now and then go out for a drink and have fun, I don't promise you that I would be upright citizen. I'm sorry.
I agree 100%.
So first of all, let's impose a minimum wage that's a livable minimum wage.
Good.
That's the first thing.
Good.
Second of all, let us, as soon as a Guyanese is born, give that Guyanese an NIS number so that when that Guyanese reaches 16, there is already a record of that Guyanese.
Okay.
That way, if she starts working, you're looking to see a tax return, an income tax return.
Good.
If they're not working, they are then eligible for some kind of benefit, unemployment benefit from NIS, so that they are on the record. But when they're working, make sure that the income they're getting is enough that they are okay. You see, these same lazy Guyanese you're talking about will go abroad and will get jobs and will work damn hard because
How is it that we hear this?
They know the money they're making is going to provide them with the shelter,
Exactly.
food, and clothing.
Exactly.
If you're not getting those 3 things from the money you're working for, first of all, you won't work.
Yeah,
And second of all, you will steal.
What a fantastic point. You just need to hammer that one more time. Everyone in Guyana, they sit down here, they say Guyanese lazy. You show me one country that Guyanese have left and have not been the most productive parts of society. Guyanese are known to be hardworking everywhere in the world except for Guyana. Why is that?
Well, any employer knows that if you get an employee and you pay that employee well, so that employee is happy to come to work, and you treat that employee properly, so that employee is not embarrassed, ostracized, put down,
Good.
belittled, first of all, you will inspire some serious loyalty.
Good.
And second of all, that same employee is going to be working damn hard to make sure that nobody else comes to take his or her place.
Yeah.
So you will get the returns for the investment you make.
Correct.
We don't see that here.
We don't. That's the problem.
The second thing is the employers also don't declare their employees and pay their PAYE and pay their NIS so that the system is broken that way. Now that couldn't be avoided if those same employees had NIS numbers from birth. Because every month you'd be asking those employees, where are you, aren't you working? And there are very few employees who will lie to the system and say, I'm not working, if they know full well they're working at Prasad's merchandise store. They will say, this is where I'm working, and then it is for the employer to be answerable as to why he hasn't paid PAYE, why he hasn't paid NIS, and why he's paying less than the minimum wage.
Yeah.
If the system is broken, as our system has been broken for 50 years, then we are not even beginning to solve the problem, and it is a vicious and despicable lie to try to paint a wide brush and say these people are lazy.
Right. I wanna point out two things here because I'm very thoroughly enjoying the comments we're getting on Facebook because it's the same PPP people that continue to go on with because they're more productive outside of Guyana, for example, because they ain't got no Chinese store to go and rob. Okay, and I'm enjoying the lack of education in the comments because it kind of fuels the conversation that needs to be had because that's the kind of the uneducated comments that you're getting, and it's to understand,
But you're getting those comments from people who've never been there.
Yes.
You see, nobody grows up saying I want to be an evil person. Nobody's born to say, oh, my ambition in life is to be a thief. You don't go and ask a second former, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes.
And he says, oh, I want to be a thief and a murderer.
Right.
Circumstances force you. And what happens is those youngsters find themselves on a street corner. They're smoking weed. They don't have anything to do. They're not incentivized to go and work for $800,000 to $120,000 a month. And then somebody comes along to say, hey, I got a quick dollar for you. Go and drop this package there. Or, hey, you just got to stand up there and shout if anybody comes.
Yeah.
And you then become an accomplice to a crime. And it is a easy, slippery
transition cycle right
to get deeper into.
Correct.
And when you talk about lazy, you are not solving the problem, you're making the problem worse.
Yes, that's exactly right. Again, back to incentive. But I'm going to tell you a psychological thing that I want to get at that you learn very quickly being in politics as long as we have. One of the ways that these two parties have perpetuated this idea and notion of keeping people in poverty and keeping things the same is this psychological aspect of them convincing the population that everything that has gone wrong is the citizens' fault. Blame yourselves and blame each other.
Yeah.
And I find that phenomenally interesting because, and this is a key, and because I always say this, anywhere you go, anywhere you travel in the world, anywhere you go, Tim, there are bad people. Okay? Any society you have entered, whether the highest level of educated people, whether the most economically flourishing society, anywhere you go, countries that we revere, countries that we speak about all the time, your Denmark, your Switzerland, your Norway, your Belgium, your Japan, your etc. Tim,
it's not about bad people.
No, there are always bad people.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with you.
Go ahead.
Everybody's a bad person.
Okay.
Listen, when someone's walking in front of you and drops a $5,000 bill, the only reason you will pick that $5,000 bill up and return it to the person is if you don't need it. We are all bad people.
Okay.
Because if I'm poor, if I'm destitute, if I'm hungry, and you drop $5,000, that's mine.
Good.
And I think that is human nature.
Good.
And unless you have the comfort, that extra comfort of layer of fat, of having some money in your pocket, of having something, of having some motivation to do the right thing because you have that comfort. I'm sorry, we're all bad people. So the system has got to empower you to do the right thing. Because keeping up with the Joneses is human nature.
Yes, yeah. Keeping up with the Joneses is human nature. I don't think everybody's gonna get that. But what's important here, Tim, is what I mean is there is a criminal aspect in every country. Okay? Crime exists everywhere. People see opportunity, people see lucrative opportunities to make money, selling drugs, selling people. I don't care what they're doing, right? They're just really bad people out there that have just decided, and a lot of the time, again, brought up in a system of education where they could go and get a legitimate job, but have just, for whatever reason, have gone into crime. So why I say that is when people, again, the uneducated that don't understand, have never traveled, don't know any better, the PPP and the APNU, entrenched followers, if you will, is understanding that if your systems are correct, if the design of your society is built on ensuring that those that contribute properly, those that can contribute to the system equally, those that educate themselves, work honestly, are given the benefits once they have participated in the system, you're going to find that less people are encouraged to become criminals, right? The problem that we have in Guyana that they cannot figure out is that if I go right now and I get a legitimate job working as a construction worker, as a cashier at a supermarket, as a nurse, as a teacher, which is sad. The reality is, at the end of the day, when I'm carrying home my 2, 3, 400,000, and this number will continue to go up, especially with cost of living going up the way it is. The reality is, you are telling me, work hard, stay and do your part, but you're not really gonna see nothing at the end of it. At the end of the day, you still got to struggle because, one, if your child gets sick, you got to carry them to a private hospital, right? Two, if you want to send your child to school, you get your job from 9 to 5, you send your child to school from 8 to 3, right? Instead of that 2 hours now, you now have to figure out that you have to pay for more lessons because your child during that school hours is not getting the proper education from the public school system. They now have to go and figure out, I need more money and I need to find more time to get my child to lessons and pay for lessons. And then again, as costs continue to rise, and then couple this with security, you can't even walk home, you can't go and catch a bus in the market in the nighttime. So you're frightened to go in Starbuck Market in the nighttime. You can't walk home, through any of the bad villages because the police ain't got no time with policing those areas and crime on rampant. You can't jump in a bus because you're frightened you're dead because nobody's monitoring the traffic properly. Now, Tim, if you continuously put people into that system, understand that it's those same teachers and nurses and cashiers, etc., that are going to have to end up leaning on those criminal elements, again, perpetuating a system that we are going to be left impoverished. The majority of the population will be left impoverished. And it's understanding that unless the harder I work and the more I contribute means the more I get back, the system will always continue to crumble.
So the two ways so far we've seen that both parties in turn when in government have done the same thing is by controlling the grassroots through the media and through oppressive control of the media, and controlling the education system and failing to improve the education system and failing to improve the administrative structure so that there can be help provided for the poor. So the poor remain poor.
Yeah.
And those same folk will go because they're entrenched and vote loyally. Now, I say it all the time, and the more I say it, the more deeply I feel about it, that the purpose of a system of laws and the purpose of a system in society is so that the powerful protect the powerless. And in our society, with only two parties, what happens is that each party recognizes that if they're out of power, they have nothing. And they quietly hold their breath and see how they can maneuver to win that slim one-seat majority at election time so that they can be in power with all the marbles, with all the strength, controlling parliament, controlling the institutions. And another way that we see both parties equated is in their award of favors to family and friends, not just in terms of the contracts. Now there's a lot of money, a lot of contracts being awarded, but in the allocation of land by central housing, the allocation of land by lands and surveys. In turn, as land is awarded by central housing and by lands and surveys on the instructions of the government of the day, We saw in 2015 and we saw again in 2020 when the government changed, the people who were handing out that land on behalf of Central Housing, on behalf of Lands and Surveys, on behalf of NISIL, they're charged with crimes. They said that they're giving away state land for nothing at all. So you see perpetuated by both parties the allocation of state resources, of the wealth of the state, to favorites on political instructions. It's another way that we see similarities in both parties because both of them want to keep the system holding their breath, hoping that they're the ones in power so that they can use dictatorial powers as an elected majority government.
Yeah. The masses can't wrap their head around this. And I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because the comments about people being favored in order to move forward is not something that the uneducated really understand. A lot of them do. But what happens in a country like Guyana is the reality is if you want to get to the point of wealth and owning your big house and driving your fancy Prado and, being as going out and spending money and traveling, etc. If you think that you are going to do that by being a nurse, being a cashier, etc. Now, anywhere else in the world, you can live a respectable life on following the rules, on maintaining the status quo. The status quo is made to build a level of self-respect.
Nursing is an honorable, admirable
Teaching.
profession. Teaching is an honorable, admirable
Absolutely.
profession. There's nothing better.
Nothing.
By-
Police officer. No, absolutely.
Yes. And there was a time when it was respected.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, now nurses, police, teachers are at the bottom of the financial scale.
That's right.
It should not be like that.
That's right. And that's how you can and Tim, that's the key for people to kind of register, click. That should be your signal in understanding that you're in a failing system. So, if the people that have the respectable positions, those people that are taking care of society, those again, I guess I just created that idea. The caretakers of society,
looking after the powerless.
Yes, are looking after the powerless. Those ones are the ones that are being mistreated the most.
So if a teacher,
what does that signal?
If a teacher who is entrusted with the care of children uses that trust, uses that position of trust to teach half of the course in the classroom, knowing that those children then have to come and pay for lessons after school,
Good.
that teacher is abusing a position of trust. But who can blame the teacher if the teacher is on some kind of minimum wage that he or she can't live on?
Yeah.
It's so obvious when you start looking at it. So if a policeman whose job it is to protect the society stops a vehicle and is offered money, how can you blame him or her if that policeman is earning the kind of salary that he or she cannot live on? Unless you give the people who should be protecting us the wherewithal, the dignity to live properly, to live a life that they're happy about,
Good.
you're in shambles. And we are in shambles.
Good. Tim, I love this comment because it's something our vice president likes to say at all of his press conferences. These guys that are criticizing this government, they have no policies. They have no plans. They have nothing to put forward. And the the uneducated PPP followers drink this up. All right. Now, they believe, oh my gosh, that's why the PPP is the best, because we have plans. Now, Tim, this conversation that we're having to get people out of this trapped system that they're in, to not end poverty, because, again, there's a lot of mindset that comes with this, but to create this system, give me, I pointed it out already. I know I kind of circling here, but people don't understand it. And I kind of feel like I have to do this. Tim, there are simple areas, like you just said, economically, create jobs, pay people a standard that they can, especially those caretakers of our society, that they can live on, raise your minimum wage, right? Pension is such an important aspect of this for me, because those are our weakest in society. Those are the people that have already contributed so much to building this country, that are left now And it's shameful how these elderly people are treated, right? And you sit there and you say, well, what are the policies to make things better? Well, you start again by showing people that when they contribute, they are given more. They will. There's a light at the end of the tunnel for you to take your back step after you've put in your work. So you start with pension plans for teachers and nurses and police and public doctors, etc., to say you and your family are taken care of.
But there are pension plans. There's an NIS. It's just that the NIS isn't run well. So you want a policy. Let me give you a policy.
Go ahead.
Pensions, you stop paying a pension to NIS at the age of 55. Now that's been the case since the 1940s, when the life expectancy was about 65. Now life expectancy is in the 80s. If you look at England, the NIS system in England, they are paying pension up to the age of 67 because their life expectancy is in the 80s. Mm-hmm. If you have an individual who is paying NIS up to 55, and then that same individual for the next 30 years is receiving a pension, you are bankrupting NIS. Mm-hmm. So the first policy, extend the age that you are working and contributing to NIS to 63, 64, 65. Now,
my father's 80
the
and
people,
still working.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because the people who don't think about it will say, oh, how can you do that? Old people, especially your trolls, will say old people deserve their rest and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I promise you this. When you speak to your average 55-year-old, he is or she is not ready to retire. She is at the full height of their intellectual, their professional power. They have 30 years of experience and they know what they're doing. These are the people you want teaching your children. Mm-hmm. And I'm in my 50s. Are there anybody to tell me I'm ready for
close to retirement? There you go.
So if I have another 20 years of not just active work, but active work at a high level, it is not acceptable to say that I should stop working and start earning money back from an NIS. Financially speaking, from the NIS point of view, you will have more revenue and you will also have a shorter period of time that you are repaying to pensioners. And most people will be happy. Teachers don't want to stop working at 55, I promise
absolutely, you. Absolutely. They go right out to school when they're retired and they go and do lessons. They go and have lessons all day.
They go and work.
Yes, absolutely.
The second policy, since we're talking about policies, is that we need to bring the self-employed people under the NIS spectrum. So, the largest private working sector in Guyana is the minibus system. You got hundreds of minibuses all around the place. Each minibus has an owner, and each minibus has at least one driver and at least one conductor. So you're talking 3, possibly 4 employees, people earning an income from every minibus you see on that road. If 20% of them are registered for NIS, I'd be astonished. I don't think it's 20% of them. Mm-hmm. But they're easy to find. All you do is you identify minibus numbers and you require that a minibus cannot be insured for anybody to drive. The driver must be specifically identified, and then that driver must be registered for NIS. Mm-hmm. So you immediately caught the owner, you've caught the driver, and you require a conductor to have a license.
Right off the bat.
All of them now have to contribute to NIS. You are increasing the number of people, the spectrum that is paying to NIS policy. The next policy is dealing with the self-employed folk. Mm-hmm. Every stall you see out on the road is unlicensed. You can't ask central government to go after them, but in the city, the main city council should be regulating that. In each NDC area, the NDC should be regulating that. Mm-hmm. And each of those people, in order to get a license to sell, should be showing, here I am registered for NIS as a self-employed person and paying NIS.
Yeah.
So there are means to bring everyone into the NIS net and into the PAYE GRA net. And if you widen the net so that more people are contributing, you then have the luxury immediately to say to those same people who are earning $120,000, $150,000, yo, we raise the threshold. You don't have to pay income tax if you're earning less than $175,000.
Excuse me for laughing, because people are not grasping the idea that the more people that contribute is the easier and less we will all have to contribute.
You know it's unfair.
They're not understanding that.
You know it's unfair.
What?
The same people we just talked about who are at the bottom of the financial structure, the teachers, the police, and the nurses, all of them got pay NIS.
Yes.
But those self-employed people who are truly earning money, the minibus folk in
Yeah.
that industry who are truly earning money,
Yeah.
the people in the agriculture sector who are truly earning money,
Yeah.
no contributions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then all of a sudden these systems can kick in and people can realize, wait a second, if I contribute, I will get back. And that's what they're missing. Right now in Guyana, the biggest problem is I not paying taxes, I not paying NIS, I don't want to pay these things because where me money going?
And
Right?
there's truth to that.
And there is truth to that. I don't blame
Because
them.
the
But they
system
want
is so
policy.
broken.
They're asking for a solution. You give them solution and, it falls on deaf ears.
Well,
but
I'm not
that's the
sure
most
about
part.
that.
It is what it is.
I don't
Yeah.
want you to equate your trolls that I know
You're right.
are
You're right.
focused on you.
For all of
with
you,
deaf ears.
for all of you out there that understand and are listening, I do appreciate. I know you guys are there. I know I focus on these clowns too much, but I appreciate because we see the viewership. It's 50,000, 60,000 people every week, so we know people are listening. So I do appreciate all of you out there.
But the trolls are running interference.
They're doing their job and they interfere in me. I'm sorry.
That's nice. It means you're relevant. It means your show is doing.
It means it's doing its job. But what's important too is it's important to counter a lot of these trolls and comments so people can understand when they go out and have their conversations in the bar, on the Friday night, Sunday, in the workplaces. They can say, wait a second, I heard that comment on the show, and that's not exactly what it is. You know what I mean? So it is part of it. Guys, on that note, it is 7:30. I'd like to thank you all for joining us here. Tim, I know you have to run out. We will be back next week. You guys have a very extremely safe weekend. Again, the roadways are dangerous. The speed cameras are working, actually. People have been slowing down.
That's been a good incentive by the government.
I do.
Has
I like
worked
it.
well. I'm amazed to see people driving within the speed limit.
Yeah.
I think it was also a sideways means of reducing corruption in the traffic police.
Yep.
Because now you don't have traffic police on the road.
Correct.
The cameras do the job.
Correct.
So that was a good move by the government. Kudos to them for that.
Good. On that note, guys, thank you for joining us. We'll be back here next week. You guys have a safe weekend. Take care.
Take care.